Anyone that's watched my previous videos will know I'm a big fan of SRS learning. You know, I've talked a lot about a website called Akane, which is what I use almost exclusively for studying kanji and most of the bulk of vocabulary, as it's covered kind of in tangent to the kanji as you learn them. Also, I'm sure a lot of people out there, maybe yourself included, you're using Genki, which is a more of a, you know, do-it-yourself flashcard system, so you can make your own decks, and that's much better for day-to-day use. When you're out and about, you're playing a game, you're reading a book or something like that, and you find a new word or a new kanji or a new phrase or anything like that, you can make a card for it, pop it in, and away you go. So for kanji and vocabulary, I find that every day, you know, I can cram at least a few more bits in, and it seems to be, you know, a tangible number. You can see your vocabulary list just growing day by day, and it's very, very gratifying. But also it's nice that you can actually see the progress. Now with grammar, I always find that a little bit more tricky, because obviously with a word you can just learn the word and then that's set, that's done. And then with grammar, it's always in context. You know, you have to learn the grammar point, then you have to learn how to apply it to a sentence, which sentences it does apply to, which sentences it doesn't apply to. And then really to get it gripped in, you can't really use a flashcard system to get it buried in there. You really have to kind of use it in a context to make the most of it. Now, if you're studying on your own a lot, which I am, it's kind of hard to constantly use those grammar points, you know. Even if there's something you're very aware you want to use, you know, if you're trying to talk to someone in Japanese, but all your sentences revolve around you just trying to use that one grammar point, it's not really the most constructive for the conversation, you know. So it's going to be a bit awkward and a bit, maybe you just look a bit ridiculous, you know, if you're constantly trying to shoehorn these grammar points into sentences where they don't fit. So often I find that using grammar points I've just learned is a bit trickier than you might expect. And also sometimes when you learn it and then you want to just use it really quickly, you can't remember the rules behind it. Now in my own personal study, I always feel that my grammar is massively outweighed by my kanji and vocabulary recognition skills. I can listen to people talking and I can hear all the words, but I can't ever formulate them into that grammatical structure which requires, you know, that understanding of what they've said. And I think the problem is that I'm not reviewing the grammar points as often as I do with the vocabulary and the kanji or the whatever I'm reading or listening to. So really I need a better flashcard system for grammar. Now since I've started, I've made several decks on Genki and I've tried to format them in different ways. I've tried to put them into a way that, you know, I can use them practically for learning grammar. You know, I'll learn a new grammar point, I'll try and make a logical translation in English so I can understand the types of sentences that it's applicable to. But again with Genki, I don't know what it is, but when I'm using those kinds of flashcards for grammar, they never really seem to stick, and I think it's because you don't actually get to use the grammar in the sentence. You just see the few hiragana which denote the grammar point or whatever it is, and you're expected to just know what it means, but also what it means in a sentence. And I think that's one of the big problems. When I first started learning Japanese, the first grammar resource I actually looked at was this book right here, which is Nigo Fun and Easy. Now it's a good book and I won't say much bad against it because it does exactly what it says on the cover. Survival Japanese Conversation for Beginners, and that's basically exactly what it gives you. It gives you a very fundamental grammar foundation so that you can understand the basic conversational scripts and things in the book, but it doesn't really go much more into that, explaining anything more complex. So that went out the window fairly quickly, unfortunately. So after that book, the next thing I tried was Tai Kim's Guide to Japanese Grammar, which is obviously one of the more popular books amongst the language learning community, and I found it to be, and still do find it to be, a very useful resource. It's got basically a chapter for every grammar point that you could possibly want to learn about, and it's broken down into very concise paragraphs, and he just does a really good job of explaining it. So all in all, it's a very good resource, and I learned quite a lot of the basics from it, to be honest. but I found that the structure, once you've got past the basics, the structure goes a bit off on a tangent because it kind of throws you out, and it's kind of like this, you can choose any chapter. It doesn't really walk you through any kind of coherence. So that's a bit tricky as well. Another of the really popular book series for Japanese learners at the beginning is the Genki series. Now, I went through Genki 1 and I went through Genki 2, and I learned everything in there, but then I started to forget things in different orders. So when I actually started forgetting a lot of the grammar points in the Genki books, I decided to actually scan and print off all of the grammar point pages in the books. For each chapter there's about 4 or 5 or 6 pages that cover the grammar points, and I felt that a lot of the examples weren't really relevant, or I knew them, but I just kept forgetting kind of the very fundamentals of what they were supposed to be doing. So I ended up making a complete pack of just the grammar points and things, and I found this much easier to go through because at least every night I could just go through a couple of pages, and instead of going through a 400-page book, I could go through a 100-page pile of paper, and it really just covered the main grammar points, and I could mark off things that I was struggling with. So that worked well for a bit, and then I started to think that maybe that wasn't even organised enough. So I got a new book, a blank book, and I started making, basically I started going through and trying to make my own notes on lessons and things like that, and then I had a tab on the side for each one of the grammar resources that I was using. So it was Taikim, Genki 1 and 2, the Mina no Nihongo series as well, and a couple of other things. So I was really at a point where I just kept making new lists and new collections of grammar points, and I was getting in a bit of a mess, and really I just kind of I plateaued and hit this wall where I felt like every time I learned a new thing, the last thing I learned was being forgotten. So I've struggled with that issue for a good while now. So I was quite delighted when the other day I came across a fantastic new website called bunpro, which is a play on the word of bunpo, which is Japanese for grammar, so bun and pro, I assume professional. Bunpro is a SRS based grammar system, and there's a couple of reasons that I think it works a lot better than other similar things I've seen before. First off, again for me personally, it's structured very similarly to the Akane website, which I love already, and it works really well for me. So when I first went to bunpro, I logged in, I made an account, and it was all very familiar to me. You've got your lesson sets and you've got your review sets, and yeah, it was just instantly accessible. Now, one of the main things I like about bunpro is the fact that it's broken down into JLPT levels, which I know a lot of people that don't necessarily see value in learning JLPT levels as their fluency structure. You could learn something from N1 before you learn everything from N5. That's obviously how languages work for a lot of people, and it's hard to classify which is more advanced than other things. But I find the JLPT, for me, the JLPT levels are very sensibly structured, and I find that as you progress through them, you can make more complex sentences because you're building on that foundation of something below. Whereas if I learned 10 grammar points from each level individually, even though I knew loads of level 2, level 1 grammar points that were quite advanced, without all that extra bit in the middle to string it all together, it's not as useful really. Instead of them trying to make their own lessons, one of my favourite things about this website is that for each grammar point they actually link you to an external website which has been established and has been viewed by thousands of people who previously was probably edited, and it's come under a lot of review. So instead of them making all their new information and risking there being mistakes, they've actually gone through hundreds of different websites and really cherry picked the best article that they believe will teach you that particular grammar point. So like I talked about, Taikim is the kind of ultimate grammar guide overall. There's a lot of times when there's other websites that explain things much better. So the way that the bunpro team have put that together, I really enjoy that actually, because it keeps things fresh as well. You're not constantly learning the same book It's written in the same style. It mixes things up, and yeah, I think it just helps you kind of ingest things a little bit better. But also for each grammar point, they usually include at least 2 different articles for that point, so you can read both and then compare. Maybe the first one you read through and you don't get the full flavour of the grammar point, or something just doesn't quite make sense. Maybe you read the second article from a different source, and you know, it clicks into place. And then when you read them together, you know, you really start to build an understanding of that grammar point. When you've read the articles for the given grammar point, next to the links for the articles, there's actually a little tick box. So once you feel that you've read them and understood them fully, you can self-evaluate and tick them off saying they're completed. Then this moves the grammar point over to your reviews queue, and then you can begin reviewing it like you would on an item on Akane or Genki or any kind of SRS system. Now, the review section is probably my favourite part of the whole bunpro process, if you will, in the fact that instead of just giving you a flashcard of the English meaning and you have to tell yourself what the Japanese grammar point is trying to highlight is, you're actually given a Japanese and an English sentence side by side, but the Japanese sentence has a blank space in it and the English sentence has a couple of the words highlighted which are based around that particular grammar point. Then you're actually required to type in the blank space in Japanese, and these kind of vary for each point. So I think that by typing it in, you're more engaged into thinking first, how do you maybe conjugate the verb and then attach the particle to the end of the word, or whatever grammar point it is. You're more engaged in actually trying to get it right. And then also, because if you do get it wrong, it'll flag up. You can click on the show answer and it will show you the correct usage of the grammar point that you got wrong. So bunpro is still a fairly new website, and because of that, there's still a lot of content missing, most namely the JLPT levels 1 and 2. So obviously they started from level 5 just to get everything in there, started testing the system out. They added 4, and then a few weeks ago they added JLPT level N3. So if you're around level N2 or N1 in your Japanese studies, I guess for getting new information at the moment, bunpro wouldn't be a good place to start, as the levels haven't been added yet, but I believe they'll come fairly soon in the future. But I would still definitely recommend checking it out, as I have. I've gone in, having recently done my JLPT N4 examination. I was really looking for N3 material, so when I started a couple of weeks ago they just added it, so that was quite handy. But before I've even touched that, I've actually gone back and gone through all of the N5, and I'm just coming up to the end of the N4 stuff, just recapping to make sure there's nothing I missed. And also, because like I said before, I really just read a lot of my grammar stuff from Taikim's Grammar Guide or the Genki books, that I didn't want to miss anything, so I've checked all the extra articles attached to these grammar points, and there's actually a few things I've missed, or some things that I thought maybe I understood but I seem to have got the wrong end of the stick, and now I've got a better comprehension of all those grammar points in general. As an additional feature as well, you can actually sync up the bunpro account with your Akane account if you have one, and this will basically remove the furigana from the words that you've already learned. It's still a bit patchy at the moment. I found when I had it selected on, I'm still getting furigana for a lot of like basic words that I had in like level 1 and 2, but I assume that's something that they're going to iron out. And you know, I just want to reiterate that it's still a system that they're building and refining. So if you do go on there and you find some issues, it's probably best to just send them an email and, you know, just let them know the issues you've experienced, or probably if you've got any suggestions. One of the main things to know about bunpro before you go in is, opposed to it being kind of a compendium of all your grammar resources, it's more of like the ultimate checklist with a review system built in. You know, it's got everything you need on a daily basis to go through and check off your grammar points and make sure you're kind of making a steady progress. But you should really definitely supplement it with all of the things that I've talked about previously, especially Taikim and Genki. But you know, there's a lot of other grammar sources out there, books and websites, things like that. I would treat it more as a checklist for all of your other studies. You know, it's a daily stop-off point to go in, do some reviews, and then when you know the things that you're forgetting or tripping up on, you can check out the links provided through bunpro or go back to your own resources which you find more comfortable to read, and then study again and come back and do your reviews. So it's more of like a daily check, make sure you're on track, and then also use the tick boxes, go through the levels, and you can see where you're up to and what you've got ahead of you. First time I used bunpro, I signed in, and I was quite impressed with one, the amount of information that was on display, and two, the refinement of the website already being so new. But the more I used it, I did actually come across something that I'm sure that will be fixed in due course anyway. I'm sure it's just a matter of not having the time for all the resources to get the task done. But a lot of the grammar points, they only have one or maybe two variations of the example sentence. So sometimes when you get something wrong and you see it again in another 4 hours, you're given the same sentence for the same grammar point. Now if you check the correct answer and just memorise that answer, I'm not sure that the actual grammar point is being drilled home there. It might just be that you're just remembering the answer from getting it wrong 2 or 3 times in a row, and eventually you'll just type it in automatically, but you still might not have fully understood it. So for me, the only thing I'd really like to see in the future is just more variation on the reviews. I mean, I don't know how many example sentences would be required to add enough variation to it, but I mean maybe at least 5 for each point. But again, to the team, if you're watching this, then I'd appreciate that's a lot of work, and that will just come in due course, when you can fit it into the schedule. So that's it, guys. If you're in a similar position to me, you're studying Japanese, you're struggling with grammar, and you're getting in a bit of a mess, with what to study next, you've got books and markers and post-it notes everywhere, then check out bunpro. It's a really, really cool website, and like I say, it's structured in a nice simple manner, so you can go through, tick off the things that you already know, and then start filling in the blanks. And I think before long you'll start to appreciate that having an SRS system for grammar that tests, and makes you type out the answers opposed to just saying the meaning is a little bit more valuable. And it's certainly helped me in the last couple of weeks, since I started using it. So I'm curious to see, how I improve and where we go after I've completed all the levels in N3. So thanks again for watching, guys. If you like the video, please just give it a little thumbs up down below. If you want to see more from Kantan Japan, then please subscribe. And if you really, really love this video, we do actually have a Patreon service, which I'm trying to at the moment think of more things to offer for you guys and really build the channel up. So having that extra support really helps me put more time into these videos and give you more stuff in the future.